Failure happens, but it's not the end of the world. I was told many, many years ago that the difference between a butcher and a barber is a butcher can grind his mistakes. You want to be a butcher and you're working in an office building somewhere and you're like, yo, I'm done, find a shop. Find somebody that'll let you chop stew meat for a while and see if you like it. It's scary sometimes. Sometimes you just have to be like, I'm gonna take this leap, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna figure it out and just kind of do it.
Hey, what's up guys? Matt the Butcher here. I am headed to Pennsylvania right now. I'm pretty excited to continue on with the butcher interviews. I'm going to go see my buddy Josh. He is a production butcher up at a facility in Gettysburg called Farmstead Butcher. These guys are phenomenal. It's a small processing facility. They process red meat and poultry, and they just recently added a smokehouse within the last year, and they have a ton of amazing value-added items. And yeah, we are going to hear Josh's story today, and he has been a butcher for about 15 years. He started out in grocery store meat departments, and he has worked his way into the processing facility that we're about to head to right now, and he is now a whole animal butcher. He can break down whole beef carcasses, pigs, and anything at this point, really. And we're gonna hear, the things that he has seen and gone through and his experiences of the last 15, 20 years as a butcher. So I am really excited to share this with you, as Josh is a good friend of mine, and he is letting me come and interview him. Anyway, guys, if this is your first time checking out my channel, I am starting to do interviews with people and different kinds of meaty content instead of just at-home value-added items like, liverwurst or salami, which I'm still going to continue. And I got a list of items that I will be doing here soon. But yeah, if you like this video, please check out my other videos. And please definitely subscribe. I got a lot of cool stuff coming down the road here. I'm just getting started. I absolutely loved making these videos, and seeing the growth on the channel is very exciting and makes me a lot more passionate about it, and want to put in more effort. And it's really all the feedback that you guys are giving me. So make sure you subscribe, and let's go check out what Josh has got to say. Josh, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
So let's get right into it. So how did you become a butcher?
After I was working in a grocery store because I needed a job, working overnight, putting cans on shelves, the meat guys would always come in early in the morning to get started. They were kind of a nutty bunch. On top of that, there was always more money in the meat department. So after some opportunity came about, I was, like, I want to go try to do this, make a little bit more money. Initially, that was the main drive. Ended up having a couple of old timers that had, come up in the industry, teach me, a lot of it to start with. It was a true apprenticeship, one where you don't touch, middle cuts for 6-8 months. You get piles of trim and you have to wrap to catch up in order to try to get on the table. So there was always that little bit of push to be faster so you could maybe cut a bottom round at some point. And that was the highlight of the week when you're I caught up and finally got to actually touch a piece of meat that wasn't made for cube steak or stew meat. So after some years of doing that, I'd gone back and forth between working some grocery positions and in meat departments through some different chains. I always ended up back in the meat department, mostly because they're like, oh, you know how to do meat, they need help, go do that. And then, what would be a week for somebody's vacation turned into 6 months, turned into a year, turned into, something. And that repeated that process several times. And then I was at a store for 6 or 7 years, was cutting, setting a service case, doing some value added stuff for them, cutting meat, unloading trucks. And somebody told me that they had a meat manager position in a clean market if you'll call them that, something Whole Foods-esque. And I was like third in line. Like there was a meat manager, there was an assistant manager, and then there was kind of me as the next person. So I kind of had to wait for two people to leave before I was going to get any, in a different position. And the meat manager had been there for 18 years. Like, he wasn't going anywhere. So I decided to take a crazy leap. I had never been a manager anywhere before, and went and applied and actually ended up getting it. So I did that. They had a primal, we ordered beef by the whole beef, and it came to us in primal cuts. So like all boned out, like boneless chucks, things like that. And kind of found my way through being a manager. Kind of found out I didn't like being a manager, which there's nothing wrong with. Like, it just wasn't, when you spend, a very, very smart person once told me, you've made it when you pay someone to do what you love. And that kind of always rang true. I enjoyed, hands-on cutting meat, ordering, stuff like that. I did not enjoy schedules, dealing with personnel problems and things like that. So I stopped being the manager, continued to work in the store, and helped out, a couple of the next managers, kind of doing the same thing, ordering. I started a whole pork program through them, because I was interested in like more kind of self-serving. I wanted to learn how to cut the whole pigs, and if they're gonna pay me to do it, I'm gonna do it. So spent, didn't know how to cut, watched a couple YouTube videos, never laid a hand on a whole pig, ordered a whole pig. My apprentice at the time sat there on YouTube, pausing and pressing play, and worked my way through cutting my first half, which was an experience. So started that program, and then, ended up learning. I like doing whole animal work. It was interesting. And then proceeded to do something which is really unpopular in the industry. I stepped out of a job that paid me pretty well to a job that didn't suck my soul out as much. I mean, pretty much. I wanted to go learn something new. I was tired of the same, hustle of a grocery store. I had enjoyed it at that point for 10 or 12 years. I've been in and out of meat rooms, a couple long stints, 6, 8 years at places. And I was like, I'm going to go learn something else, and took a pretty significant pay cut to go out into the world of whole animal butchery. I did a short stint at a place working on a red meat processing floor. I was in the beef room, had never broke a beef from scratch, stood at a table where we broke 4 to 5 a day. Kind of had to learn quickly because there was 4 other guys on the table, and you just kind of watch people who've been doing this for 20 years, and you're like, oh, okay, this is how I do it. So it's mass repetition again. You just do it day in and day out. I left there to my current position at I guess the USDA would call it an extra small USDA poultry slaughter facility and red meat processor. We don't kill red meat on site, but we do process whole animals, custom and stuff like that. Where I've been now for almost 2 years this summer. I work in the red meat room. I process anywhere from 10 to 15 pigs and 1 to 3 beef a week, sometimes lambs, occasional goat. Pretty much anything that comes in the door, we'll cut.
So what are some of the changes you've seen in the meat industry?
It's actually been quite a bit on the retail end of things. When I started, guys that trained me, were on the very edge of when they were still doing, whole animal stuff in grocery stores. They got in it by the carcass. The old timers that taught them, they were on the very tail end of some of that stuff. So I started learning on boxed beef and boxed pork. And then after years, you see less and less of people actually cutting in grocery stores, and more of it going to like a plant somewhere where they cut and distribute for the whole company, which is weird because I always felt like you couldn't service your customers in the same kind of way, because specialty cuts pretty much went out the door when you don't cut anything in shop. And when I went to the clean market, it was a lot more of, we were back to getting, whole animal primals, things like that. When I left, I had started a whole pig program. So we were getting a whole pig in. that I pretty much taught myself how to cut via YouTube. A lot of pause and start and just replicating what that was. That market was kind of designed to go back to that kind of farmer, we knew all the farmers that were raising our stuff. We knew that was kind of like the identity of the store. And now working at a place where it literally, there is nothing I cut that's doesn't come in as a carcass. So my journey has definitely changed throughout, the time. But I think the way, you see a lot of more people focused on wanting to know where stuff comes from, as opposed to, just buying it from the store and seeing where, how it's raised, what standards it has and things like that.
What was that transition? What clicked in your mind that made you want to go from working box meat to a whole animal butcher now?
Box meat comes from somewhere, and maybe it was just a curiosity. Like, I really enjoyed cutting meat. I really enjoyed, the process of it and setting service cases and things like that. But all that stuff comes from somewhere. So I'd gotten curious, and years back when I was still, working in a grocery store, I had found a local butcher shop and took a day off from work and went and hung out with, some guys that were doing it. They were come down on Tuesday. Tuesday's the day we process pigs. You can come in and watch. I did that and thought it was super cool that, that's where it comes from. I was working with 3 generations of butchers that were, grandfather, father, and son. I thought that was a really cool, thing. And it kind of gets you out of that corporate environment, and it gets you out of, you're just, here's my 30 boxes of pork loins I have to cut today for the case. So I guess a curiosity more than anything, that it kind of has pushed it farther and farther each time. And just kind of being stagnant in things, when you're just cutting box beef all day long, there's nothing wrong with. I did it for 12 years. I enjoyed most of it, but there's something else out there. And when you get bored and you're I want to learn something new, but I like the industry I'm in, it's kind of the next step, it's how do I put it in there? How does it come in the box? So then we go figure out how it gets from being in the field to being in the box, and I think that's it. And I've enjoyed, I get to cut whole lambs, whole pork, whole beef, sometimes some goats, and figure out what to do with all of it. And it makes it, it's not the repetition of just constantly standing at a table and cutting steaks all day long, which just ended up being kind of boring. There's a funness to it, and it definitely has given me a skill set that I thought was not useful, because in the world, all the whole animal guys always look down on all the box beef guys. That's just the way life is. It's you're
not a real butcher.
Yeah, I'm better than you because it's a whole animal. Well, there was days where I cut multiple pallets of meat, and some of these guys break down 2 hogs a week. And I'm I just did, thousands of pounds in and out the door. And there's something to be said about that hustle that's transferable, the skill set, when you're cutting, it's sale items for say, when you're cutting, it's, New York strip sale, and you cut, 300 pounds of strips in a day for the weekend, you get good at those things because you do them in so much repetition that you have to be good at them, because it's just constantly doing it, where some other guys don't have some skill sets that box beef guys do. And I think that's one of the biggest, I thought that my skill set wasn't transferable to places, but I know how to set retail numbers, margins to make those work. I know how to cut for what customers buy and things like that. You can cut 400 oyster steaks out of every beef you've ever cut, but if nobody's buying them, it doesn't really matter, because you're not making any money off of it. So a lot of those skills that I had from being a retail person, I found in recent years has really helped me in other aspects of things.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about the value-added program that you have at the current position that you're working?
Yeah, so along with when I first started, they had gotten a grant to put in a USDA certified smokehouse, which they did shortly after I started. And me and the owner kind of full tilt boogie trying to figure out how to make bacon in bulk, how to do Christmas hams, how to do corned beef, how to smoke kielbasa, kind of, your imagination is the sky at this point. When I started here, they made a lot of handmade sausages, which is another thing I had never done. We always got it in a pack. When I started, we were doing probably 800 or so pounds of fresh sausage from whole pigs that came in the door. We're selling them in a retail shop, selling them to restaurants at a wholesale position, and some other places in some retail markets, which we have continued to expand on. I think weekly there's probably 20 sausages between our fresh and frozen cases available at our shop. And it's kind of one of those things. I'm super fortunate to have a boss who says try it a whole bunch. Doesn't matter how nutty of an idea it is sometimes, but what's 20 pounds? We can sell 20 pounds of anything. So I've gotten to make sausages from nutty ideas I've had, change sausages. We make some custom sausages for some local restaurants that are, specific to them, using their beers and things like that, tasting them and figuring out how it all works, which has been super interesting because I had never done any of that. So it's this, you go from nothing to, well, here's the sausages we make, to at first you're always like, hey, I got this idea, kind of quiet about it. Hey, could we maybe do this? After the third or fourth yes, it's like, hey man, we're going to do this. And it's like, what? Okay. And ideas come from, me and him are both of a similar age. We have, pretty similar interest in food. So it's like, you eat some chicken wings and you're like, yo, I like that flavor. And you figure out how to put that into a sausage. Or I like to walk around grocery stores and look at ingredients, just stuff, with no end result. I saw a thing where chefs did that. They'd walk around a bodega and just look at ingredients and figure out oh, I'm going to buy this, or this is interesting, and then figure out what to do with it later. I like to do that. I like to do play on words, so it's now, we're probably making 1,300 to 1,500 pounds of sausage a week. A bunch of that is now smoked sausage. Bacon, I can't even count how much bacon we make. And we started to do, some, this doesn't work, let's try this, brainstorming with, both of us are learning at the same time with it. So it's not well, here's the way it is. It's well, maybe if we try this, you try it and it doesn't work, or it works better. And then you're all right, well, here's one step, let's try this. Which has been really exciting and a real creative side of what I do now. Spend a lot of time standing at a table cutting meat, have a lot of time to think of ideas, it's just hey, what do we try this? Yeah, let's try one. Doesn't work. There's been a couple that have been interesting that haven't quite worked. There's been a couple that have worked pretty well that we would do again and have done again. And some of them have even become ones that are in our, our standard line now.
What are some of your future goals as a butcher?
The place I'm at now, I would really like to develop our red meat room a little bit more. Get some more, more carcasses to work with. I think there's a demand for what we do and where we're at. And the more you do that, the more choice you get, I would like to continue developing our value-added sausage side. There's been talk about, figuring out some new ideas and figuring out how to best optimize our smokehouse. We do a lot of stuff through our smokehouse now, a lot of quantity. We cut a lot of pigs here, make a lot of bacon, hams, and things like that, and kind of have that baseline of like, here's our bacon. Like at this point we've gotten our bacon and our hams dialed in. Like there's no need to mess with them anymore. Like they are where they need to be. But it'd be nice to, you know, do some other flavors, you know, figure out some twists on things to make, you know, coffee bacon, or, you know, we worked on some jalapeno bacon or some different flavors to start doing stuff like that, and pretty much doing some of the more European style stuff. You know, there's a lot of German sausages, and where I'm at currently is a very historical German area. So there's a lot of stuff which you can go back, you know, instead of like making new ideas, you can go back and look at some of the older ideas that have gone by the wayside. Things like, you know, liverwurst isn't popular everywhere. We just made a liverwurst that was amazing. It was probably one of the best ones, you know, I've ever had, but it's not popular everywhere. So you get to do some of those more rural, rustic kind of things, which are fun because they're still new. They're new to me. You know, I've never made liverwurst, and to get something that, you know, liverwurst is a little complicated to get binds right and get textures right, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the process, and to get them right at the end, it was super fun. Sometimes you have to enjoy the learning process of what not to do in order to figure out what to do, and hopefully find, you know, this is, you know, I like to call it my forever place, but there's a lot of growing still to do here. There's a lot of things to learn. I've still never worked on a kill floor. I don't know if I'd ever want to work on a kill floor, but I believe that at some point I need to do that just to understand the process. I don't really have a desire to do that for work. Those dudes, I totally respect the guys that do that. It's a hard, smelly, wet job. But I think, you know, in order to fully understand what you're doing, you have to, you know, go back. The place I'm currently working is a farm. Also, we raise a lot of our own chickens and pigs. So, you know, having that understanding of, you see something in the animal and the carcass, and you know, you ask like, hey, what happened to this? And like having that knowledge, which the owner I'm currently working for has a huge knowledge about stuff like that. So I'm learning a lot about what you do to animals to make them the best for butchery, and to make the best product in the end, which is super interesting. Farming, another job I never want to do. Totally respect people that do it. It's hard, you know, unthankful work. But it's interesting to learn those things, like how they decide what breeds to do and things like that. It just gives you more rounded knowledge about the whole industry, which is kind of what I've been doing in most of my, you know, my career.
Okay, so what is some advice that you would give people that are trying to get into this trade?
Get into it where you can. Find some people who are willing to teach you. I know it's not, in this day and age, it's not a very popular thing to say, but find a place that'll let you come hang out. You know, that was one of the biggest things. You know, sometimes don't be scared to just be like, hey, can I come by and watch for the day and see if you like it, and like to learn a little bit more. And if you're somebody, if all you can find is a job working in a grocery store cutting pork chops, do it. Those skills somewhere down the road will be transferable. You might not think they will be, but they will be. And I think to have, you know, an interest in it. Like, there's a lot of people on the internet. There's a lot of people to look at, to watch. There's a lot of questions to ask. I've been doing this 15 plus years. I still find people doing things differently on the internet, or trying to figure out how somebody does something. I break meat 5 days a week for 8 hours and still watch guys break pigs to see if they do something that I can steal, because everybody does something a little differently. Like, that dude might have 20 years. You don't know what little trick he knows. You know, be observant of like the world around you, and understand that there's, you know, people, it's the internet. People are going to hate on you for whatever you do. But if you have a drive and an interest in things, don't let somebody on the internet that's been like, oh, you're doing it wrong. You know what? We all did stuff wrong. We all have put the wrong things into grinds. We've all had to make grinds out of stuff that shouldn't have been grinds because it was ugly. Failure happens, but it's not the end of the world. I was told many, many years ago that the difference between a butcher and a barber is a butcher can grind his mistakes. And you still sell it. You still make money off of it. And I think just be interested. The community that I've seen and have known in the butcher world online and in person has been super neat. I've made some really interesting friends who know a lot of things. You know, find yourself some people who you're friends with and you can bounce ideas off of. Be stoked for people that are doing cool things in the world. Like, oh, you're doing that? That's super cool. Like, how do you do that? You know? Me and you have gone, we literally drove 8 hours one way to work for 20 hours to drive 8 hours back home just to go to a homie shop and work and had a blast. We were tired. I took 2 days off of work to go work for free. I learned a bunch that day. You know, you stand in a room with 4 dudes who have, you know, been doing this and you learn things. Sometimes shut up and listen. You know, you never know what's going to be said around you. Let people talk and absorb what they're saying. Like, that's the only way you're going to learn. You know, ask questions no matter how dumb they are. Like, I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? Like, you're never going to know if you don't ask. You know, and take steps that, you know, sometimes are scary. Like, you want to be a butcher and you're working in an office building somewhere and you're like, yo, I'm done. Find a shop, you know, find somebody that'll let you chop stew meat for a while and see if you like it. You know, it's scary sometimes, and we all have bills and we all have responsibilities as adults, and sometimes not as adults. You know, life is expensive. Sometimes you just have to like do it for the inside. You have to, you know, make your little fuzzy heart warm by not being in some soul crushing job that you hate. And sometimes you just have to be like, I'm gonna take this leap, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna figure it out and just kind of do it.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Matt.